The lake never looked the same after Helen died. The water still shimmered at dusk, soft gold against the tree line. But to me, it had lost its music. The waves didn't whisper anymore. They just lapped against the dock like a tired heart. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. I hadn't been back to Stillwater Lake in nearly 2 years. When Helen passed, the cabin became a museum of everything I couldn't face. Her sketches pinned to the workshop wall, her coffee mug still sitting by the sink, a cardigan draped across the rocking chair like she might return at any moment. I told myself I'd sell the place, but I couldn't. That cabin was where we spent 37 years building a life, and 30 years building boats. I'd designed my first skiff right there, small enough for one man, strong enough to outlive him. Helen used to tease me about the smell of varnish clinging to my shirts. "It's your cologne, Walt," she'd say, laughing from the porch as I tested the hulls. After she was gone, I stopped building. Stopped laughing too. But last week something shifted. Maybe it was retirement. Maybe it was the quiet ache of not having anyone to answer the phone. I just knew I needed to see the lake again, to sit where the world still made sense. So I packed my truck, loaded a thermos of black coffee, and drove the familiar 2 hours north through pine country. The road twisted between hills, memory playing on repeat. For a moment, I almost felt young again. The air changed when I neared Stillwater, sharper, thinner, touched with cedar and cold. I rolled down the window, breathing it in like medicine. The turnoff came just past mile marker 43, a gravel lane almost hidden beneath overgrown branches. I smiled. Helen had always wanted to keep the cabin invisible to the world, but as my tires crunched down that familiar path, something felt off, a sound that didn't belong. Hammering laughter and a faint hum of machinery. I slowed. My cabin wasn't supposed to have sounds. It was supposed to have silence. When the trees opened into the clearing, I felt my chest seize up. There were 2 trucks parked in my drive, both newer models, both carrying tarped loads of lumber and paint cans. A wide banner hung crookedly from the porch. Grayson Handcraft Boats. Custom orders open now. For a few seconds I just sat there, staring through the windshield, heartbeat loud in my ears. That name, Grayson Handcraft, was mine. I'd built that brand, registered it, lived it. No one else ever touched it. I stepped out slowly, the cold biting through my flannel. My boots crunched over sawdust. The scent of varnish hit my nose. Sharp, familiar, nauseating. Through the open workshop door, I saw people moving around. 2 young men sanding a hull, a woman painting trim, and standing. In the center, clipboard in hand, giving orders like he owned the place, was Derek, my son-in-law. The sight hit me harder than any blow could. Derek in my apron, wearing my logo, gesturing toward a half-finished skiff I recognized instantly. Helen's song, the last boat I ever started before she died. My tools lined up neatly on the bench behind him, as though he'd inherited my very hands. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't speak, just stood there in the cold air, watching strangers walk through the sacred place Helen and I built together. Then Derek turned, his easy grin plastered on, and started talking to a group of people in suits. 3 men, 1 woman, all clearly investors. Handmade from recycled mahogany, he was saying. I learned this craft from my late father. Every design comes from the Grayson family legacy. The words sliced through me. Late father, legacy. I was the legacy. And I wasn't dead yet. My throat tightened. I stepped forward, boots echoing on the planks. One of the workers noticed me first, froze, mid-sand, and glanced nervously at Derek. Derek turned. Our eyes met, and I swear, for 1 heartbeat, he went pale. "Walt," he started, then caught himself. "Sir, can I help you?" His voice was public smooth, the kind you use on clients, not family. The investors turned, curious. Derek's smile didn't waver, but his jaw twitched slightly. I took another step. You can start by telling me why you're in my workshop. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes. Then calculation. He chuckled lightly, turning to the investors. Local folks wander in sometimes. This old cabin's been here for decades. A lot of history. History. That word stung more than it should have. I looked around. The photo of Helen that used to hang above the window was gone. My sketches, my blueprints, gone. In their place hung laminated business posters with Derek's name and a tagline that made me want to tear them down. Craftsmanship with a modern soul. You're trespassing, Derek, I said quietly. The investors went still. He laughed again, louder this time. I think you've got the wrong address, sir. This is Grayson Handcraft Boats property. My heart hammered. It was, until someone decided to repaint the sign and rewrite history. The woman investor frowned. Wait, I thought you said you were Grayson? Derek's smile flickered. Family name. My father-in-law's business originally, but he looked at me pointedly, passed away years ago. It was like hearing my own obituary. I wanted to shout. Instead, I said softly, Funny. I don't feel very dead. The silence that followed felt like a storm holding its breath. One of the workers put down his sander. The investors exchanged looks. Derek's face went rigid, the practiced confidence draining away. Then his eyes hardened. You need to leave, old man. This is private property. Private property? My property. For a moment I thought about Helen, her hands covered in paint, her laughter echoing across the lake, her promise that this place would always be ours, and something in me snapped. I built this cabin with my wife in 1907, I said, voice trembling but firm. Every beam, every nail, every boat you see here came from these hands, and you're standing in the middle of it, lying about it. The investors murmured among themselves. Derek stepped closer, his jaw tight. You're not well, Walter. Maybe you should go back to your truck before someone gets hurt. I stared at him, realizing something I'd avoided for years. That charm, that arrogance, that easy way of bending truth until it fit his needs. He wasn't just lying for profit. He was lying to erase me. Enjoy the spotlight while you can, I whispered, because when I make one phone call, everything you've built here will vanish. Just like the truth. His expression faltered for just a moment, enough for me to see fear, real fear beneath the bravado. And in that moment, I understood something Helen used to say. You can't teach integrity to someone who's never been humbled. I turned and walked out, leaving behind the echo of my boots and the ghosts of everything I loved. Outside, the lake shimmered under gray sky. Cold wind bit at my face. It wasn't the homecoming I'd imagined, but it was the beginning of something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. When I drove away from the cabin that morning, I didn't head home. I stopped at the overlook above Stillwater, where Helen and I used to sit on warm evenings with coffee in hand and the smell of pine in the air. From there, I could see the cabin roof, barely visible through the trees, and the figures moving in and out like ants, continuing their little business as if nothing had happened. I should have stormed back, called the sheriff, demanded an eviction, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there and watched, heart pounding, and realized something deeper than anger was rising in me, humiliation. My son-in-law had turned my craft, my sanctuary, into a sideshow, and I hadn't even seen it coming. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with sirens. It seeps in quietly, disguised as family. The sun hung low, filtering gold through the pines. I took out my old thermos, poured coffee gone lukewarm, and tried to steady my thoughts. I needed proof. Not rage, not accusations. Proof. I started my truck and circled around the lake, taking the long dirt road at the curve behind the property. There was an old boathouse on the east shore, one I'd built decades ago for winter storage. Helen used to call it the heart of Stillwater. It's where I kept records, blueprints, and spare wood sealed from weather. If Derek was parading my work as his own, He must have been using those plans. I parked quietly and walked the rest of the way. The boards creaked under my boots, the familiar smell of oil and dust greeting me like an old friend. I unlocked the heavy door, same brass key I'd carried for 30 years, and flicked the lights. The workshop looked different. Not messy, but rearranged. My drawings, once pinned neatly on corkboard, were missing. The filing cabinet where I stored boat schematics was half open, folders gone. On the workbench sat a glossy brochure, printed on high-quality cardstock, Derek's logo at the top. Grayson Handcraft Boats. Tradition meets innovation. Below the title was a photograph of my own designs, the Mariner 15, the Stillwater skiff, and even Helen's song, each labeled Original Designs by Derek Lawson. I felt my pulse in my neck. He hadn't just borrowed my legacy, he'd stolen it line by line. I flipped through the brochure, reading copy that sounded eerily familiar. Then I realized why. It was familiar. Derek had copied my words from a blog interview I did 10 years ago for a woodworking magazine. Same sentences, same phrasing, only edited to make it sound like his journey. That cut deeper than any theft could. I sat down on the stool Helen used to occupy when she'd read to me during long nights of sanding hulls. My fingers brushed the gouges and scratches we'd made together, each mark a memory. I could almost hear her voice again, calm, steady, wise. "You taught him too much too soon, Walt," she would have said. She was right. I'd wanted to give Derek a skill, a purpose. He was charming, good with his hands, but impatient, always looking for shortcuts. I thought teaching him to build something from nothing might ground him. Instead, I'd handed him the very tools he'd used to bury me. A noise broke the silence, the crunch of tires outside. Through the window, I saw Derek's silver SUV pull up beside the boathouse. He got out alone, scanning the trees, then came straight toward the door. My breath caught. I should have left, but something in me wanted this confrontation. He stepped in, eyes wide when he saw me. "Jesus, Walt, what are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I just held up the brochure. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair. "I can explain. I'd love to hear how you explain printing my designs under your name." "Look," he started, taking a cautious step closer. "It's not what it looks like. You weren't using them anymore. The shop was empty, the website dead. I thought—" "You thought wrong," I cut in. "You thought death meant ownership, didn't you? Helen's gone, I'm old. So you figured the world wouldn't notice if you rewrote a little history." "Walt," he said, softening his voice, "you taught me everything I know. I just wanted to carry the name forward. You should be proud of me." "Proud?" I felt my throat tighten. "Proud that you turned honesty into marketing? Proud that you looked my daughter in the eye while you built a business on lies?" His jaw tightened. "Emma doesn't need to know the details. She's happy. I'm providing." "Providing with what? Stolen craft and counterfeit legacy?" He flinched, eyes narrowing. "You're making this personal." "It is personal," I said quietly. "Every plank, every design, every hour I spent carving those ribs. That was my life. You didn't just steal property, Derek. You stole meaning." For a second his mask slipped. His voice hardened. "You think you're the only one who's worked for something? You think just because you're old, you own the concept of legacy? You built boats. I'm building a future. That's the difference." That arrogance, that smooth, practiced tone, reminded me of the investors' faces earlier. He'd perfected it. The man could sell rust as gold if you let him talk long enough. I stood slowly. "If you were truly building a future, you wouldn't need my past to do it." He stepped closer again, lowering his voice. "Let's be reasonable, Walt. Nobody's getting hurt here. You've got your pension, your memories. Let me handle the business side. We both win." That's when I realized how deep his delusion ran. He genuinely believed he was doing me a favor, rewriting my story for modern success. I looked him in the eyes. "You've made a mistake, son, and you're about to learn how expensive it'll be." I walked past him toward the door. He didn't stop me this time, just stood there, eyes dark and jaw tight, watching the man he'd underestimated take back something that wasn't for sale. Outside, the wind had shifted. The lake rippled beneath a gray sky, whispering against the dock like an old warning. I stood there for a long time, letting the cold sink into my bones. I wasn't sure what the next step was yet. Sheriff, lawyer, or my own two hands. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. It steadied me. I stayed on the east shore until the light thinned to pewter and the lake folded into itself. That kind of dusk always feels like a closed door. Quiet, heavy, final. I didn't want final. I wanted clarity. By the time I walked back to my truck, a decision had already taken shape. Simple as a knot, I'd tied 1,000 times. I would confront Derek where his audience could hear me. Not to humiliate him, though there was a savage corner of me that wanted exactly that, but because truth shouldn't have to whisper in hallways while lies rent a megaphone. The gravel popped under my tires as I eased into the main drive. Lights burned in the workshop, warm cones falling across the porch rail, silhouettes drifting behind the windows. A little A-frame stand sat at the path's edge, the kind you'd see in front of a farmer's market booth. In clean block letters, open. House, commissions available. Demos at 7 p.m. I pulled off in the shadow of the birches and listened. Voices, laughter, the thin ping of a mallet from somewhere in back. A speaker low in the corner, playing blues too soft to own the room. I could smell the familiar oil and resin, a scent so much a part of my life that for a second I felt that old reflexive calm. Helen used to say the shop smelled like honesty. I crossed the yard slowly. The door was propped open with a plane I recognized, my grandfather's, the steel burnished by a lifetime of palms. I nudged it with my boot and stepped inside. They'd staged the place well. 3 hulls took up the center floor like sleeping animals put on display. My Mariner 15 sanded to a dull shine, a half-ribbed frame on jigs, clamps angled like praying hands. And at the far wall they'd pinned large prints of design sketches, relabeled in thick modern fonts. Lawson No. 1, Lawson No. 2, Lawson No. 3. The curves were mine. Even the mistakes, quirks I'd kept for personality, were mine. A dozen people milled about with paper cups. I recognized the investors from the morning, plus new faces. A couple in boating jackets, a high school kid with grease under his fingernails, a woman in a wool coat taking photos, like she was storing up proof for a friend at home. At the workbench, a young assistant showed someone how to fare a plank with a long board, the slow rasp shushing like tide. Then I saw Emma. She stood at the end of the bench, arms folded, her mouth in that firm line that always arrives just before she argues a point to the end. She wore the green pea coat I bought her when she was 20, a Christmas clearance find she'd loved into threadbare. A child tugged at the hem of a stranger's sweater nearby, and for a second I saw Emma at 5. Mud on her shins, hair in crooked braids. The summer she'd named all my clamps like pets. Something in my chest gave. Dad? Not a question, not quite. Her voice came out cautious, as though if she said my name too loudly, the room might tip. Heads turned. Evening, I said, keeping my tone level. Didn't know you'd be up. What are you doing here? She looked from me to the investors and back again, a rush of color rising in her face. You can't just walk in like this. Can I? I nodded toward the rafters. Built the door, built the hinges, built the floor you're standing on. Derek detached himself from a cluster near the coffee urn and strode over, slick as a salesman. If fear had cracked his mask at the boathouse, he'd patched it with fresh confidence. Folks, he said, turning, this is Walter, local woodworker, did some projects out here years ago, knows his way around a chisel. The rebranding of my life into past tense made a few people smile politely, the kind of smile you give a museum docent. Emma blinked like she'd been slapped. He's not. He's my father. The room shifted. People angled for a better view without moving their feet. Derek's jaw flicked tight, then recovered. Right, he said warmly, as if we'd all agreed to a script. Family affair. Couldn't do this without him. You've been doing it without me just fine, I said, right down to signing my name on your work. A small sound escaped the woman in the wool coat. The kid with grease on his hands glanced at the wall of Lawson drawings, then at me. Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. We've always credited the Grayson heritage, he announced to the room. My father-in-law here inspired the line. I'm just updating it for modern demand. Inspired, I repeated, tasting the word. He inspired himself with my registered designs, my jigs, my joinery methods, and my name. Emma stepped closer to Derek. Did you put Dad's name in the materials? Her voice was brittle. The brochures? The site? Of course, he said without blinking. Babe, we talked about... I held up the brochure I'd found at the boathouse and flipped it open to the page where my old interview had been paraded as new copy. I read aloud, not loudly, just enough for the nearest 10 people to hear. Made from a lifetime of river miles and salt on the skin, a small boat ought to vanish beneath a man. A few people murmured, that's something I told an editor in 2014. Word for word. Derek laughed, a practiced dismissive sound. It's a phrase boat builders use. Emma studied the page. I saw the exact second she recognized my speech patterns. She'd grown up on them. She didn't look at me, but her fingers ghosted along the margins as if touch could verify authorship. I set the brochure down and walked to the ribbed frame on the jigs. The clamps still wore faint pencil marks, mine. Each clamp had a tiny initial and number so I could grab the right pressure without thinking. E7 in my left palm, C3 in my right. When Emma was 9, she'd quizzed me like it was a card game. I plucked one free and held it up. The crowd watched the small ceremony as if it meant more than it did. Maybe it did. This shop, I said, has a language you can't fake. Not with fonts, not with stories, not with a logo that turns a family into a brand. For a sliver of a moment, nobody spoke. You could hear the sander in the back cut out and wind up again. Somewhere outside, a gull wheeled and barked. Derek clapped once, a crisp cut through the silence. It's demo time, he declared. We'll show you how we lay a plank. There's nothing more honest than process. People turned to follow him. Emma didn't move. Her eyes were on the photo rail above the windows, where Helen's sketches should have lived. Now there were framed certificates. Grayson Handcraft, LLC, Starren 2023, Master Craftsman Award, Lawson, a Chamber of Commerce ribbon, all pomp and embossed borders. Helen's pencil studies of stems and transoms had vanished like a tide line washed clean. I went to the old map chest against the wall, the one Helen used for charcoal and paper. The second drawer always stuck halfway. You had to lift as you pulled. I did it without looking. Inside, sandpaper packs, a few dull pencils, and the corner of a sketch I knew in my bones. Helen's hand was unmistakable. The light pressure, the economical curves, the little notes in the margins in her tidy slant. I slid the sketch free. Still water skiff. Revised shear 1-4, her note read. In the bottom right, a coffee ring half eclipsed her initials, HG. When I turned, Emma's eyes were already glassed with salt. Where were these? She whispered, to no one and to everyone. Derek's voice carried from the center floor, bright and confident. Line your plank by feel. Let it tell you where it wants to live. He placed a plank against the frame and looked up to find half the room watching us instead. His smile stiffened. Where were Mom's drawings? Emma asked louder. Derek straightened. We archived them. Modern clients want a cleaner aesthetic. We can feature them later, babe. I placed the sketch on the bench. Flat, reverent. An archive is a place of honor, I said, not a hiding place. The kid with the grease under his nails edged closer, eyes darting between me and the sketch, as if he were in class. And the teacher had asked an impossible question. Mister, he said, voice thin with apology, I followed his steps off YouTube. They work. But when I tried your clamp sequence, the plank stopped fighting me. I felt something unclench in my ribs. What's your name? Jay. He swallowed. I just want to build something true. There it was, the whole reason a place like this should exist. Not for brochures, not for chambers of commerce, for the kid who wants to make a thing sturdy enough to carry a life. Folks, Derek boomed, cutting the moment off at the knees, we're drifting from the point. This is a modern shop. We respect tradition, but we don't live in it. If you're here to debate nostalgia, that's not our business model. He was good. Very good. Even with the audience wobbling, he knew how to steady the table. I leaned on the bench and looked straight at Emma. I came back today because I found my name stamped on work I didn't do, and my wife's sketches tucked into a drawer like secrets. I can live with obsolescence. I can't live with counterfeiting. Derek laughed again, this time sharper. Counterfeiting? That's a legal term, Walter. Careful where you swing it. My mouth was dry. Words still mean things. Great, he said, nodding at the investors. Meaning, let's show you something real. He gestured to the assistant, who fetched a bottle of varnish and a horsehair brush, the kind Helen preferred. He held it like a prop. We finished with a proprietary blend. Linseed spar and a citrus reducer, I said. His eyes snapped to mine. Lots of shops use that. Not at that ratio. Ratios are trade secrets, he said tightly. Then why are they written on the inside of the cabinet door near the sink? I asked, and the line of people closest to the sink turned irresistibly like flowers chasing light. The assistant's ears pinked. Emma pressed her palms to the bench, steadying herself between two worlds. She inhaled slowly. Derek, she said, did you file the LLC with Dad's brand? Without asking him? He flashed her a look that begged for complicity. We talked about the future of the shop. You said we needed to move forward. Forward isn't the same as removing my family, she said, the edges of her voice honed now. A tide runs out slowly, and then there's a line where it's just gone. I saw that line pass across Derek's face. The charm left. The performance ended. What stood in its place wasn't a craftsman or a son-in-law. It was a man unwilling to be ordinary. He placed the brush on the rim with a deliberate little clack, then faced me as though the room had vanished. What's your play, Walt? You gonna call the sheriff and tell him your daughter's husband is running a pop-up? You gonna sue your own blood? Because that's what it will take. Paper. Courtrooms. You ready to sit in a hard chair while a kid in a tie asks if your memory's still good enough to sign your name in blue ink? The quiet after that felt different, edged, waiting. The investors studied the floorboards with grave interest. Jay tucked his hands in his hoodie. The woman in the wool coat lifted her phone, lowered it again. Emma spoke first. Don't talk to him like that. Derek didn't look at her. I'm talking to the man who abandoned his shop when grief got heavy, and now wants to punish the person who kept it from rotting. Abandoned, the word landed like grit in my teeth. I glanced up at the skylight Helen insisted on, the one we'd placed to catch morning sun. It was black now, a square of night. I saw us 10 years earlier, balanced on a ladder while she measured the opening, hair pulled into a knot, pencil in her mouth. Light makes everything easier, she'd said. All right, I said. I stepped around the bench and went to the old oak cabinet at the back. The crowd tracked me with their chins, as if I were moving through shallow water. I opened the door, and there they were, my ratios, in my block print, finished with a little joke Helen had added in green marker. 2 words we said whenever we needed a third hand. Ask Emma. I turned the door so the room could read. Even from 6 feet away, you could see the angles of time in those letters. Human hands write with a pressure no printer can counterfeit. Derek's mouth flattened. You broke into my storage, he announced, loud enough to rattle the glass. You're done here. Done? I repeated softly. Son, I'm just beginning. I closed the cabinet gently, returned to the bench, and put Helen's sketch in Emma's hands. Her fingers trembled and then steadied. She folded it carefully like a flag. Folks, I said to the room at large, I'm going to ask you to step outside for a few minutes so my family can speak. You'll get your demo. You'll get your answers one way or another, but you don't need to witness this part. They hesitated, looking to Derek for permission he didn't want to grant, and to me for authority I hadn't claimed, but somehow owned. The first to move was Jay. He tucked his chin and slipped out, followed by the woman in the wool coat and the couple in boating jackets. The investors lingered until Derek said, 10 minutes, through teeth he hoped were hidden. When the door thudded and the night came in, the room felt truer. The shop looked like itself again, worn and solemn, the kind of place that remembers who you were even when you don't. Emma stood between us like a mediator who had not planned to work tonight. I need to hear both of you, she said. Derek spread his hands. I kept the shop alive. I protected your father's legacy. I brought customers in. Without me, this place is driftwood. And my mother's drawings? She asked. His jaw flexed. They're sentimental. We'll curate them later. I could have listed invoices and registry numbers and the email I still had that showed Derek forwarding my CAD files to himself at 2:11 a.m. last June. I could have told her about the magazine text he'd copy-pasted and the LLC using a post office box that wasn't ours. All of that would come. Proof is a slow machine. But grief isn't a spreadsheet, and identity isn't a bullet point. I said, if you strip the labels off an instrument and play it for an audience, it still makes music. But it's theft all the same. Her eyes filled, then cleared. She looked at Derek. Did you tell the bank you owned Dad's designs? He stared at her, measuring which truth would cost him least. I told them I owned the rights to the brand. That's enough to secure a small line. She closed her eyes. You forged the rest. I streamlined it, he snapped. Nobody gets anywhere by waiting for permission. He'd said the quiet part, out loud. There it was, the engine that had always hummed under his charm. I nodded once, a small oath to myself. Tomorrow, I said. I'll be at the county office when they unlock the doors. I'll file what needs filing. I'll speak to who needs speaking to. Tonight, I'm asking you to stop using my name, my designs, and my shop. Derek laughed without humor. No! Emma inhaled sharply. Derek! No, he said again, and the word rang like a dropped wrench. This is my business. You want to stand beside me or not, Em? Choose. It was the first time he'd put it in that shape. He must have thought he'd built enough scaffolding of favors and shared bills and long evenings to hold her. He hadn't calculated the weight of a pencil note that said, revised sheer 1 fussurus in her mother's hand. Emma looked at him a long time. Then she folded the sketch again, one precise crease, then another, and slid it into the inside pocket of her coat like a compass. When she spoke, her voice was clean. I'm choosing the truth. Silence. Somewhere beyond the walls, a loon called across the water, that lonely, beautiful sound I've loved since the first night we slept on this land. Derek smiled, a thin, hard smile. You'll be back, he said, when the rent is due and the real world bumps your nostalgia into the ditch. Emma didn't answer. She took my arm, light as a bird landing, and guided me toward the door. On the threshold, I paused and turned back to the shop. Lock up when you're done, I said to Derek. Tomorrow, I change the locks. He opened his mouth and shut it again. It's a special kind of quiet when a man considers the first consequence he can't charm his way around. We stepped onto the porch. Night air lifted the hair at my neck. The yard had emptied, the visitors clustered by their cars under the pines, exchanging low guesses and sideways glances. Jay stood apart, hands in his pockets, looking at the slice of lake through the trees. When he saw us, he lifted his chin in a small salute, like a kid saluting the flag at a ball game. I gave him a nod back and felt the thread of something old and good tighten between two strangers. Dad, Emma said when we reached the gravel, tell me what you have. Proof, all of it. In the boathouse, I said, and in my head, which last I checked still holds water. She smiled at that, a flash of the girl who used to sit cross-legged on the dock, and asked the moon if it ever got tired of pulling the tide. The shine dimmed quickly. The night had work for us yet. I didn't know about the LLC, she said. I should have. I should have asked. You trusted your husband, I said. That used to be a virtue. We stood there a minute listening to the needles lift and settle in the wind. The door behind us clicked. Derek didn't call out. He didn't apologize. He didn't run either. Predators rarely sprint when they still believe the herd will circle back. Tomorrow, Emma said, the word firm now. We start. Tomorrow, I agreed. I felt oddly steady, as if the lake had come up under my feet. Truth does that when it isn't preening for an audience. We went to our separate cars. She didn't ask me to stay at the house in town. I didn't ask if she felt safe. There are questions you save for daylight, so the dark can't swallow the answers. When I turned the key, the radio came alive mid-song, a harmonica somewhere between a sigh and a prayer. I let it play us down the lane, 2 sets of headlights cutting twin paths out of the clearing, one toward town, the other toward the east shore, where my grandfather's plane would be right where I left it, waiting to hold a door open or close it for good. I drove slow. The lake kept pace. Tomorrow had already begun. The county building in Maple Hollow hadn't changed in 40 years. The paint still peeled in the same places, and the same dented radiator hissed beside the clerk's desk like it was muttering secrets from 1965. That morning I walked through its glass doors holding a thermos of lukewarm coffee and a folder so thick it could break a wrist. Inside were deeds, tax receipts, permits, blueprints, and something harder to categorize. 30 years of sweat pressed into paper. The hallway smelled of dust and ink. A flickering light buzzed overhead. The place was half empty. Early spring mornings never brought crowds to the property office. My boots echoed on the linoleum as I headed toward a window labeled Property Records and Business Filings. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 70s, with steel gray hair pinned up neatly and glasses perched at the tip of her nose. When she looked up, recognition crossed her face. "Walter Grayson," she said, voice warm but surprised. "Well, I'll be. Haven't seen you since Helen brought you in here arguing over setback lines." I smiled faintly. "Still arguing, I'm afraid. Different kind of line this time." "Lord help us," she murmured, pushing aside a stack of ledgers. "What's he done?" That was the thing about small towns. News traveled without feet. "Filed an LLC using my name, my designs, my property," I said quietly. "I need a certified copy of every registration related to Grayson Handcraft Boats, filed in the last 12 months. She whistled low. "That's not a family squabble. That's identity theft." As she typed, the rhythmic clatter of her keyboard filled the room. "You know," she said, "Helen used to bring donuts for the whole office whenever you two filed something. Said paperwork was the only part of your marriage she could control." That pulled a laugh out of me, rough and short. "Sounds like her." The printer groaned and spat out a handful of pages. She stapled them neatly, slid them across the counter. "Here you go, honey. Filed 6 months ago. Listed manager, Derek Lawson. Registered address, 114 Lakeshore Road. That's your cabin, right?" "Was," I said, "until he moved in." She adjusted her glasses, eyes narrowing. "That's fraud, Walter. Straight up. You want me to notarize these? You'll need them for court. Please." As she stamped the corner of each sheet, a familiar heaviness settled in my chest. I'd built that business name 25 years ago, first with a hammer and nails, then with trust, the kind you earn from clients who shake your hand and look you in the eye. Seeing it on legal paper beside Derek's name felt like reading my own obituary again, this time typed and signed. "You gonna press charges?" she asked gently. "Eventually. First, I need to protect what's left." She nodded, slid the documents into a manila envelope, and added her notary seal. "You tell your lawyer to come straight to me if he needs testimony. I remember when you registered that name the first time. 1998. Helen had paint on her hands." I swallowed hard. "Thank you, Marla." Her eyes softened. You always kept your word, Walter. Don't let this fool make you question that. I left the building feeling both lighter and older. The air outside was brittle, touched with the smell of thawing earth. Across the street, the old diner was open. I hadn't eaten since dawn, but I wasn't hungry. I needed to think. I sat in the truck, turned on the engine for warmth, and opened the folder again. Each line of text looked so official, so clean, as if ink could make lies respectable. LLC filed under Grayson Handcraft Boats. Manager Derek Lawson, registered agent Emma Lawson. My breath caught. I hadn't expected that. I flipped to the second page. Emma's signature sat at the bottom. Real ink, real name. It hit me like cold water. She must have signed when Derek pitched the business to her, believing it was a tribute, not a takeover. The betrayal deepened, not by intent, but by trust, misplaced. I stared at her signature until the words blurred. My daughter's name had become a shield for a thief. Not maliciously, but damage doesn't care about intention. It just spreads. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Emma's name lit the screen. I hesitated before answering. Dad? Her voice was small. He left early this morning, said he had errands in town. You at the county office? I was, I said. Just finished. She exhaled. He's been on the phone since last night. Whispering. Talking about investors pulling out. Said something about me signing something wrong. You signed the LLC, Emma. Your name's on the registration. Silence on the line. Then a fragile, "Oh, God." Don't panic, I said gently. It's fixable. But we need to move fast before he tries to dissolve or refile. I heard her pacing, floorboards creaking beneath her steps. What do I do? Meet me at the diner across from the courthouse. We'll make copies. Go through everything. She agreed, voice shaking but resolute. Okay, 15 minutes. When she arrived, she looked like she hadn't slept. Hair tied back, loosely, dark circles beneath her eyes. She slid into the booth opposite me and set down her keys with trembling fingers. I should have read what I was signing, she said. He told me it was just paperwork for insurance. He's counting on that, I said. He's hoping guilt will make you freeze. She stared out the window, jaw tight. He doesn't know me as well as he thinks. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of pride. Not the kind born from accomplishment, but from lineage. Helen's grit had skipped no generation. We spent the next hour sorting documents, highlighting lines, marking connections. Emma took photos of everything for backup. When the waitress came by, we ordered coffee refills. We didn't drink. Halfway through, Emma stopped, brow furrowed. Dad, look at this. He added a clause transferring intellectual property rights upon retirement or incapacitation of the founder. Meaning if I die, or if he convinces a court I'm incompetent, he owns everything. She went pale. He said you were slowing down lately. He told me you forgot your appointment with the estate lawyer last year. That was his appointment, I said flatly. He missed it. The reality of Derek's strategy sank in. He hadn't just stolen my business. He was constructing a narrative. An old man losing touch. A dutiful son-in-law stepping in to preserve legacy. A lie wrapped in a kindness. Emma whispered, He's planning to have you declared unfit. Not if we beat him to the truth. By noon, we had a timeline, an evidence trail, and a plan. Step 1, file an affidavit reclaiming ownership. Step 2, contact the state trademark office. Step 3, secure witness statements. Starting with Marlette Records and the contractor who'd built the original dock with me 20 years ago. It felt strange, assembling proof of my own existence. Before we left, Emma reached across the table, her hand trembling but sure. I'll testify if it comes to that. I'll tell them I signed under false pretenses. Don't put yourself in his crosshairs, I said. I already am. Her voice carried something I hadn't heard since she was little. Defiance laced with courage. Helen would have smiled. We left the diner together, the afternoon sun harsh and clean. Across the street, Marla waved from her office window. For a moment, everything looked simple again. A man, his daughter, a plan. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered instinctively. Mr. Grayson? The voice was male, polite, but clipped. This is Officer Burden with Maple Hollow PD. We've received a report from a Mr. Derek Lawson claiming you've been trespassing on his commercial property and threatening him with violence. Emma froze beside me. He what? I asked quietly. Sir, I'm required to ask if you'd be willing to come down and make a statement. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Appreciate your cooperation. The call ended. I looked at Emma, whose face had gone pale again. He's moving fast, she said. Then we move faster, I replied. He's not the first man to build something out of stolen wood. We drove back towards Stillwater Lake, the sun, already slipping lower, painting the water in long streaks of orange. My reflection in the windshield looked older than I remembered, but there was steel under the weariness. At the police station, I met Officer Burden, a young man, polite, uneasy. He took my statement, flipping through Marla's notarized pages as I spoke. His brow furrowed deeper with each detail. Mr. Lawson didn't mention the LLC paperwork, he said slowly, just that you'd broken into his place of business. Check the property deed, I said, filed under my name since 1997. He nodded, tapping at his computer. Confirmed. That lines up. Looks like a civil issue, not criminal. We'll note the false report. I exhaled. Not relief exactly, but the kind of breath you take when the first domino falls the right way. When we left, Emma looked at me with something new in her eyes. Not pity, not fear, but trust reborn. He's going to panic when he finds out you filed, she said. Good, I replied. Panic makes people sloppy. We drove the rest of the way in silence. At the turnoff to the cabin, Emma looked out over the lake and whispered, Mom would have handled this better. No, I said softly. She just would have smiled through it. As we rounded the last bend, I saw movement by the porch. Derek's SUV parked in the drive, its rear door open, boxes half loaded. He was standing by the steps, phone to his ear, pacing like a man whose plans were burning down faster than he could rebuild them. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of his voice, low, angry, desperate. I told you, we'll fix it. He's old. He doesn't have the fight left. He didn't see us yet, but I saw him. And in that moment, every regret I'd carried for being too forgiving hardened into purpose. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun had drowned behind the ridge. The sky was the color of old steel, and the lake below it looked like a mirror someone had forgotten to polish. Derek's SUV still sat in the drive, one door open, boxes half loaded. I killed the engine and let the silence swallow the ticking of the truck. From the porch, I could hear him talking on the phone. Low, rapid, the voice of a man losing control but pretending otherwise. I'm handling it, he snapped. No, he's bluffing. The old man doesn't have the stamina for court. He turned as I climbed the steps. His face froze halfway through a sentence. The phone stayed at his ear, but his words died. Then he recovered, putting on that same public grin. Gotta go, he muttered and hung up. Walter, he said, like we were meeting for coffee instead of the battlefield of our shared ruin. You shouldn't sneak up on people. Wasn't sneaking, I said. You were just too busy lying to hear me coming. He laughed once, brittle. You've been busy, I hear. County records, police reports. You think that makes you the hero in this story? I stepped past him and into the cabin. It smelled like lemon cleaner and varnish, his brand of cover scent. Half the living room was stripped of furniture, boxes stacked where my wife's chair used to sit. The photo of Helen that belonged above the mantel lay face down on the table. Glass cracked. Something inside me shifted. You're packing, I said. He shrugged. Preemptive. Thought it might be better for everyone if I gave you space for a few weeks. You've been under stress. Emma's worried. Is that what you told her? I asked. That I'm unraveling? His smile stayed fixed. She's my wife. She trusts me. I told her you were having episodes, forgetting things, confusing dates. That's not a crime, Walt. It's compassion. Compassion? The word came out of his mouth like poison in a glass of milk. She's meeting me here, you know, he said. I called her after you left the station. She said she wanted us to talk as a family. The thought hit me hard. Emma, coming here, caught between us. I'd hoped she'd rest a day before stepping back into this fire. He poured himself a drink from my cabinet, Helen's bourbon still unopened since the funeral. You mind? He asked, not waiting for an answer. Tonight's going to be emotional. I wanted to break the glass in his hand, but didn't move. Control is harder than rage, but it lasts longer. He took a slow sip. You know what I realized about you, Walt? You build things to control them. Boats, houses, even people. But once they start floating on their own, you panic. That's why you hate me, because I don't need your permission anymore. I stayed silent. Silence unnerved him more than argument ever could. A car engine approached, headlights sweeping across the window. Emma's car. She stepped out wearing that same green peacoat, hair pulled back, her shoulders squared but tense. When she opened the door, the warmth from outside followed her in. Dad, Derek. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes flicked between us, measuring, absorbing. Derek set his glass down gently, all performance again. Emma, sweetheart, good timing. I was just explaining to your father how misunderstandings can spiral, how people make mistakes. She removed her gloves, slow and deliberate. You mean fraud. Strong word, he said, smiling. We're family? We don't use court terms on each other. She looked at me. You filed the affidavit? I did. Derek's jaw twitched. And what exactly did you tell them? That I kidnapped your intellectual property? He laughed softly. Emma, he's angry because he can't let go. That business was dead until I revived it. Her voice stayed level. You revived it by erasing him. He blinked, caught off guard by the calmness of her tone. Honey, that's not fair. You signed the LLC. You were part of it. Her hands tightened on her coat. I signed because you said it was an insurance document. You lied. The air between them cracked. He took a small step closer, lowering his voice. Em, you're tired. He's manipulating you. The same way he manipulates everyone with that guilt trip routine. He wants control back, and he's using you to get it. I watched her face, the muscles tightening as if she were holding something heavy she didn't trust herself to drop. You called the police on him, Derek. You said he threatened you. Did he? He looked down. He raised his voice. Did he threaten you? His silence was answer enough. She turned toward me. Dad, go wait by the truck. I didn't move. Emma, please. Her voice had that edge again, the one Helen used when she was trying not to cry. I stepped out onto the porch, the boards cold under my boots. Through the window I saw them facing each other, both standing rigid, reflections broken by glass. The lake beyond looked still, but I knew it was moving under the surface, the way people do when they're pretending not to. I heard muffled voices, then silence, then a sound. Glass breaking. I went back inside. Derek stood near the table, his glass shattered at his feet, bourbon spreading across the floorboards. Emma was against the wall, eyes wide, breathing fast. He wasn't touching her, but he'd stepped close enough for intent to fill the space. You should leave, I said quietly. He turned toward me, teeth gritted. You think this is over. You've turned her against me, against herself. I didn't have to. Truth did that. Truth is a luxury for men with no ambition, he said, his voice cracking. You spend your life sanding wood and thinking that makes you righteous. I build. I create. You destroy, I said. The room was silent again except for the ticking of the wall clock. Helen's clock. Tick, tick, tick. 3 heartbeats of history counting down to something neither of us wanted. He looked at Emma again, searching for a sign, a crack, anything, but her eyes had gone flat. Get out, she whispered. He laughed, short and sharp. And go where? You think your dad's going to take you in when you realize he's just as controlling as he claims I am? Get out, she said again. He started to speak, but I took a step forward, slow, deliberate. "You heard her." For a second he looked at me the way a cornered man looks at a locked door. Then he grabbed his keys and stormed past, brushing my shoulder hard enough to jolt me sideways. The door slammed so hard it shook dust from the rafters. Emma pressed a hand to her face. Her breathing slowed, then steadied. "He's gone," she whispered, as if the words might make it true. I looked down at the broken glass on the floor. The bourbon smell was sharp and bitter. "For now," she sank into a chair. "He's going to come after you, Dad. He's desperate. I know. And you're not scared?" "Terrified," I said honestly. "But fear's better than pretending everything's fine." She nodded, eyes shining. "I think I loved him because he reminded me of you." That hit like a nail through old wood. Clean, painful, and true. "Then maybe you loved the part of me that needed fixing," I said softly. Outside, the night had settled deep over Stillwater. The trees swayed, whispering against one another. I picked up Helen's photo and set it back above the mantel. The crack through the glass cut across her smile like a scar. Emma followed my gaze. "Do you think Mom would forgive me for being blind?" "She'd call it human," I said. "She forgave me for worse." We sat there in silence for a long time. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows that danced on the walls, 3 shapes where there used to be 2. Some families fracture loud like explosions. Others crack quietly like ice splitting underfoot. Ours had done both. When she finally stood, her voice was small but steady. "I'll stay at the cottage tonight. I don't want to be alone." I nodded. "Lock the door. Leave the light on." She hesitated at the threshold. "Dad, thank you." "For what?" "For not yelling." I smiled faintly. "Too old for yelling. Besides, it wastes breath we might need later." She smiled back, faintly, then left. When her taillights disappeared down the drive, the silence that filled the cabin wasn't peace. Not yet. It was something closer to clarity. I swept the broken glass into the dustpan, tossed it into the trash, and poured the rest of the bourbon down the sink. Helen's bourbon, the one meant for remembering. I'd been saving it for closure. Turns out closure tastes like spilled whiskey and quiet resolve. As I stood there, the phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. Again. When I answered, a voice hissed through the line. Low, furious, trembling. "You think you've won," Derek said. "But this isn't over. You ruined my life." "No," I said quietly. "You did." Then I hung up. The wind rattled the eaves. Somewhere on the lake, a loon cried again. Long, mournful, unbroken. I didn't feel victory. I just felt tired. But under the fatigue, something else stirred. Not rage, not sorrow. Something simpler. Purpose. The kind that wakes up early and files the right papers. The kind that rebuilds even after the wood's been scorched. Tomorrow, I'd start sealing the workshop, locking what was mine, and maybe, just maybe, starting what came next. Morning came slow and gray, the kind of morning that doesn't announce itself with light, but with sound. The wind pushing through pine branches, the lake groaning softly as ice thinned along the edges. I'd slept maybe an hour, sitting upright in the old armchair by the window, still half-dressed and half adrift. I poured what passed for coffee, thick, burnt, but hot, and sat at the table with Helen's notebook open in front of me. It still smelled faintly of cedar. She'd kept every client name, every invoice, every note about materials and design updates. The last entry was dated 3 days before she got sick. I ran my fingers over the ink, her handwriting steady and elegant, like she'd known how much I'd need this someday. I took out the folder from the county office, my weapon now, and began building the case, piece by piece. The first step was to list every sale Derek had made since he took over, then find the buyers, verify who they paid, and confirm what they were told. Truth leaves fingerprints. Lies always smudge. By 9 o'clock, the lake had turned silver under a pale sky. I loaded my files into the truck and headed toward town. Maple Hollow wasn't big, but word traveled fast, especially after the spectacle at the workshop 2 nights ago. The diner waitress gave me a cautious smile when I walked in, the kind that said she knew something, but wasn't sure whose side to take. "Morning, Mr. Grayson," she said. "Heard there was some trouble out by the lake." "Nothing that can't be fixed," I replied. She poured my coffee and left me to it. I unfolded the newspaper someone had left on the counter. There, in the community section, was a small article. "Local boat builder expands family business. Grayson Handcraft enters new era." The photo showed Derek, all smiles, standing in front of my cabin, my boats behind him. Emma's name was mentioned as co-owner. My stomach turned. The story had been submitted days earlier, before everything fell apart, a last echo of his illusion. I folded the paper and took a sip of bitter coffee. I had work to do. The first name on my list was Calvin Rudd, a retired fisherman who'd ordered one of my Stillwater skiffs back in 2010. I'd heard he'd bought another last summer. From Derek. His number was still scribbled in Helen's notes. When he answered, his voice was gravelly and skeptical. "Grayson? Didn't expect to hear from you. Thought your son-in-law was running things now." "That's what I'm calling about," I said. "You bought a skiff from him?" "Yeah. Nice piece of work, though it needed sanding near the stern." "Why? Something wrong with it?" "Just verifying invoices." "Mind telling me who you paid?" He chuckled. "Paid Grayson Handcraft LLC by transfer." "Why?" "Because that account doesn't belong to me," I said. "And that design you bought. That's my blueprint." A pause, then a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. I knew something was off. The man talked a good game, but he didn't know port from starboard when I asked about trim weight." We talked for 20 minutes. When I hung up, I had my first affidavit. Verbal for now, but ready for paper. I called 4 more clients that morning. 3. Confirmed Derek's name on receipts, all with the same story. Glowing promises, personal branding, and exaggerated heritage tales. One woman, Mrs. Bixby, nearly cried when I explained what happened. "I only bought it because it said, 'Handcrafted by Walter Grayson's family,'" she said. "If I'd known—" "You couldn't have known," I told her, "but your invoice will help fix this." By noon, I had 6 statements lined up, enough to show a pattern. I drove to the post office, where Helen used to mail our invoices, and asked to speak to Tommy, the clerk who'd worked there since before fax machines died. He looked up from his ledger and grinned. "If it isn't the boatman himself." "Trying to earn that title back," I said. "You seen Derek in here lately?" He scratched his chin. "Sure have. Been mailing packages labeled sample kits to a New York address. Thought maybe he was branching out." I showed him the LLC printout. "That address?" He nodded. "Same one." "Can you print me the shipping records?" "Not without a warrant," he said, lowering his voice. "But I can tell you what I remember." He winked. "Most of them were small crates, insurance labeled as art pieces. All paid with business checks. Your business name." "Appreciate it, Tommy." I left with another note of evidence and a knot tightening in my gut. Derek wasn't just selling locally, he was shipping my boats, maybe under new names, to private collectors, which meant money was moving, maybe enough to make running feel worth it. I stopped by the hardware store next, just to clear my head. Old Mark Holbrook, who'd supplied me with varnish since the 80s, stood behind the counter. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Heard you're in a scrape with that boy." "You could say that. He's been in here buying premium sealant on your old account. Charged it to Grayson Handcraft like it was business as usual." I sighed. "Add that to the list." He nodded, eyes kind but weary. "Sorry, Walt. You deserved better. That's the thing about small towns. They know the truth long before the papers print it." By dusk, my passenger seat was a paper battlefield. Affidavits, notes, names, receipts. I drove back toward the lake, the world outside tinted orange and gray. I should have felt vindicated. But what I felt was something heavier, the weight of proof. Justice doesn't feel clean. It feels necessary. As I turned onto the gravel lane, a flicker of motion caught my eye. A black car parked just beyond the bend. Engine off, windows tinted, no plates on the front. I slowed, watching. No movement, just stillness. Then as I pulled closer, it started. Headlights blinked on, engine roared, and it sped past me down the hill toward town. My rearview mirror caught a flash of the driver's silhouette. Tall, familiar posture. One hand gesturing in anger at a phone. Derek. He was watching me. I parked at the cabin, heart pounding, and stepped out into the cold. The lake was dark now, only the faint moonlight marking its edge. I locked the door, checked the windows twice, then sat at the table again with Helen's notebook. If he thought intimidation would stop me, he'd forgotten who taught him patience. I copied each affidavit neatly, marked dates and signatures. It was slow work, but honest work, the kind that steadies a man. Near midnight, the phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. You think paper will save you? Wait till they see what I have. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at the words for a long time, the glow of the screen reflecting off Helen's photo on the mantel. Then I turned the phone face down, wrote one last line in her notebook. Truth is patient. Lies are loud. I'd let him make noise. I had work to do. The invitation came folded like a peace offering and worded like a threat. Family dinner. Tonight. We settle this like adults. Derek had chosen the Hearth and Harbor on Maine, the kind of place where the napkins are heavy and the candles make even bad ideas look warmer. The hostess knew my name and still asked for it. That's how you can tell a town is bracing for a scene. The room smelled of rosemary and butter. A jazz trio floated soft notes from the back. Emma arrived first, a little early and a little fragile around the eyes. She wore the green peacoat again, as if it had become armor by accident. We stood in the vestibule long enough for the hostess to look relieved that we weren't arguing yet. Then Derek appeared, pressed shirt, careless smile, the confidence of a man who'd invited a jury to a party and planned to win them in the first 10 minutes. He hadn't come alone. At his elbow hovered 2 of the investors I'd seen at the workshop. Blazer and cufflinks, I named them in my head, and a woman he introduced as our counsel, Ms. Kincaid, which told me this dinner was choreography, not reconciliation. Jay was also there, awkward on a clean hoodie, eyes bright and watchful. Derek must have invited him for optics. The table had 8 places. A chair at the end lay empty, reserved for whomever Truth finally chose to sit in. Walter, Derek said, as if we were old friends running into each other at a ball game. Emma, thank you for agreeing to this. I set my manila folder beside the bread plate and pulled out a chair. You sent a time. I chose to be punctual. He smiled tighter. We all want the same thing. Clarity. Clarity tends to show up when you stop dimming the lights, I said. The waiter poured water. The jazz hummed. For a heartbeat, the whole place held its breath. Derek raised his glass. To family, he said. Emma didn't lift hers. To honesty, she answered and took a sip of plain water. Ms. Kincaid opened a leather padfolio, slid on reading glasses, and crossed one elegant leg over the other. Mr. Lawson has prepared a brief statement, she said. The script had begun. Derek leaned forward, palms open, voice gentle enough to pass a lie detector. Walter, I know you're upset. I know grief and age make details slippery. He let the sentence dangle, a suggestion that wanted to be a fact. I took steps to protect the brand, to protect Emma. The LLC legitimizes the work. Growth requires structure. Structure that removes the man who made the thing you're structuring, I said. Blazer cleared his throat. Is this really about credit? Or about letting go? It's about theft, Emma said, steady. He used my father's name and designs without permission. Cufflinks glanced at Ms. Kincaid. We were told Mr. Grayson had retired and couldn't manage the details. There it was, the story Derek had been polishing. A gentle euthanasia of competence. He folded his hands. I want to show you something, he said. He took out his phone and tapped, then propped it against a water glass so it would carry. A recording began. My voice, thinned by distance and voicemail compression, saying, "I can't find the—" What was it? The the thing we talked about the other day. The file. The table watched me instead of the screen. "That was a message from last fall," Derek said softly. "He forgets things. Leaves burners on at the cabin. He called the county office about the wrong parcel twice last year." Emma turned to me, alarmed. "Did you?" "Once," I said. 30 years of drawers. A man misfiles a folder, not his mind. I looked at Derek. "Play the rest." He blinked. "That's all that matters." "Play the rest." Jaw ticking, he tapped again. The longer clip resumed. My voice returned. "Found it. I mislabeled the folder. Ignore that last call." A pause. "And yes, I turned the burner off. Thanks for the reminder. We good for Saturday?" Then another pause and a different voice. Derek's. "Yeah, Walt. All good." You could hear the grin in it. Silence took the table. Jazz filled the space the way water fills a crack in a hull. Smoothly, with pressure. "That was convenient editing," I said. "Truth tends to look different when you let it finish its sentence." Ms. Kincaid didn't flinch. "Even so, capacity is a fair question, Mr. Grayson. We need to know the brand is in stable hands." I slid a photocopy across to her. County records, notarized. "Filed this morning, affidavit of ownership, notice of misappropriation of brand and designs, motion to enjoin further use pending review. Signed, stamped, witnessed by the same clerk who watched me register the brand in 1998. She remembers the donuts my wife brought." "Donuts aren't evidence," Derek said, but he swallowed hard. "They are memory," I answered, "and memory is why brands matter at all." He forged ahead, voice bright again. "All right, let's talk money. Investors want to know if we can still deliver existing orders. We can if Walter agrees to a licensing fee." "No," Emma said before I could. "You don't negotiate with stolen property." Ms. Kincaid interjected. "Mrs. Lawson, your signature appears on the LLC registration. You're co-owner. It would be prudent to—" Emma took a document from her purse and slid it across. "Statement of inducement by deception. Filed 10 minutes before this dinner. I'm withdrawing and affirm that I signed under false pretenses. My husband represented the papers as insurance forms." "Allegedly," Derek snapped. The word hovered above the candles like a moth that didn't know which flame to die in. Blazer shifted in his seat. "This is getting complicated." "It's simple," I said. "What he built is mine. What he promised you was mine. What he told you about me was his." Jay had kept quiet, eyes flicking between faces like he was taking notes for a test that might decide his life. Now he spoke, soft but clear. "He told me you'd lost your touch," he said to me, "that you were sentimental and slow, but in the shop, when I tried your clamp sequence, the wood behaved." He looked down at his hands, embarrassed by the clarity of the truth. "Wood doesn't lie." Derek turned on him with a smile that had no kindness in it. "Thanks for your input, Jay. Why don't you show our guests a time-lapse of the finishing process like we discussed?" Jay swallowed. "I forgot the charger." "That's fine," I said. "We don't need a video. We have something better." I reached into the folder again and laid out a series of photographs. Helen's sketches, Emma's childhood notes on the clamps, the cabinet door ratios in my block print with Helen's green marker joke. Ask Emma. The ink had bled a little where time and humidity had taken nibbles, the way lakes do with shorelines. I turned to cufflinks. "Tell me, sir, do those look like documents you print to stage a set? Or the kind you live with until the edges wear thin from use?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ms. Kincaid tapped her pen. "These are compelling narratives," she said carefully, "but they don't resolve the present business obligations. There are orders, partners, ongoing commitments." "Which he made using a name he didn't own," I said. "That's on him." Derek leaned in, face pleasant as a storefront. "Walter, I'm offering you a way out that preserves your dignity. A licensing deal. A founder's stipend. You can make speeches at chamber events about heritage and let the shop earn." "Earn," I repeated, tasting the word. You want me to bless your theft in exchange for a seat at the ribbon cutting. It's called compromise. It's called laundering. He laughed, and it sounded like a fork scraped against the nice plate. He turned to the investors. Again. He's emotional. I respect that. But this is bigger than feelings. This is about whether we let nostalgia choke a brand in its cradle. I reached for my water, but didn't drink. Derek, I said, a brand isn't made of brochures. It's made of promises kept long enough that other people can lean their weight on them without falling. It's made of the notes your wife's mother wrote in the margins because she wanted her daughter to inherit a world that felt solid. Emma's breath caught at that. She'd folded her napkin into precise squares, then demolished them without noticing. Derek's eyes went flat. I don't owe your memories anything, he said. I owe my future everything. And yet you had to steal a pass to pay for it, I said. The waiter, who had been hovering with a tray no one touched, cleared his throat. Will there be on trays? He asked in a voice that tried not to take a side. No, Emma and I said together, not looking at each other. Ms. Kincaid gathered herself. Let's be practical. If Mr. Grayson pursues an injunction, production stops. Investors lose. Staff lose. The community loses. Staff? I asked. You mean the 2 kids you pay cash because payroll would leave a paper trail? Cufflinks flinched. Is that accurate? Derek's jaw flexed again. They're contractors. Temporary. Jay stared at the table. Enough, Emma said, voice low. She reached into her coat again and pulled out her phone. I recorded something yesterday, not to trap anyone, to remember the sound of a lie while it was still soft. She tapped, and her screen lit the underside of the table with blue. Derek's voice spilled out, hard, urgent, the mask down. Nobody gets anywhere by waiting for permission. He's old. He doesn't have the fight left. If we get him to look confused in front of the bank, the paperwork will flow. It wasn't long. It didn't need to be. The investors looked at each other in the slow way men do when they're measuring the depth of the hole they're standing in. Ms. Kincaid was very still. Derek didn't bother to deny it. You recorded me, he said to Emma, like a man marveling at a sudden weather change that refuses to obey his plan. She held his gaze. I wanted to hear myself the next time I thought you were a better storyteller than my father. He leaned back, smiled with all his teeth. You just made litigation inevitable, he said softly. Congratulations. On the contrary, I said, you made it inevitable the night you used my name to sell my boats. I stood. This dinner is over. Tomorrow morning the filings become public. Production stops. Orders are frozen. I'll take the hit, not because I like chaos, but because I can't feed your fire with wood that isn't yours. Blazers start to say something about alternatives. Ms. Kincaid started to say something about settlements. Jay said nothing. He was looking at the sketches like a boy reading the back of a photograph and deciding if he wanted to be related to the faces there. Derek rose, too. He had the posture of a man who'd been slapped and had decided to call it weather. Walter, he said, lowering his voice for just us, the rest of the table forgotten, you don't have the stamina for war. Then you should have chosen a skirmish you could win, I said. He smiled again, but it was all gums now, no bite. I still have friends, he said. Officers who answer my calls. Bankers who like predictable stories. People who believe the future belongs to the young. Then bring them, I answered, and bring your edited voicemail again. This time, let it play to the end. We left money for waters we didn't drink and bread we didn't eat. On the sidewalk, the night had a knife-edge chill, the kind that wakes you up right behind the eyes. Emma linked her arm through mine like she used to do when she was 9 and terrified of fireworks. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For everything I didn't ask. For how much I wanted the world to be easier than it is. That's not a crime, I said. That's a wish. We crossed to the truck. Behind us, the restaurant murmured back to life, the clink of silverware, the low tide of other people's ordinary evenings. A wind gust carried the scent of cold river up Maine and through my lungs. It felt like standing in a boat when you first push off, wobbly at the ankles, sure in the bones. At the corner, a cruiser idled, maple leaf decal on the door, Officer Burden at the wheel. He lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel in a small salute, not to me alone, but to the idea of a thing done properly. Tomorrow would cost. That was fine. Boats don't stay afloat because you wish them to. They float because someone checked the seams twice, and then checked them again after dark when no one was watching. At home, I laid the folder on the table, smoothed the papers like you smooth a blanket over a sleeping child. Helen's notebook waited, open to a blank page. I wrote the date in 1 sentence. A legacy is not what they remember about you. It's what you refuse to let them forget about themselves. I capped the pen, turned off the lamp, and let the dark be what it is. Honest, full, unafraid of morning. Before dawn, the lake was slate and the sky a worn ribbon of pewter. I brewed coffee by feel, the way I'd done on fishing mornings with Helen, measure by memory, not by spoon. I stood at the sink and watched the first weak seam of light unpick the far ridge. Somewhere a loon stitched its call through the dark like a needle through cloth. The day felt thin but determined, as if it had decided to happen whether we were ready or not. By 7, the filings were public. Marla had texted a single word, posted, and a photo of the docket entry. Temporary restraining order sought. Preliminary injunction hearing set for Friday, 10 a.m. The county calendar looked like a quiet pond most days. Now our names floated there like 2 boats on a collision course. I spent the early hours buttoning the seams. I emailed affidavits to the state trademark office, uploaded scans to a cloud folder Emma and I shared, and printed extra copies of everything onto heavy paper that felt like it might be harder to tear. A man can't keep trouble out with paper, but he can at least make sure the door doesn't swing shut on a lie. At 9, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was precise and smooth, the kind of voice that could straighten a tie without hands. Mr. Grayson, this is Thomas Hale from Hale and Randolph. We represent Mr. Lawson. I sat at the table, pen in hand. Go on. We've reviewed your filings. We intend to oppose the TRO. Further, we are preparing a petition in probate court seeking limited guardianship regarding your business affairs, citing concerns about capacity. Our client tells us you've displayed confusion, memory lapses, and unsafe behavior at the cabin. Your client edited a voicemail, I said. Play the rest next time. Our petition will include statements from investors who were present when you appeared agitated at dinner. They will confirm that you raised your voice and made threats to cease production. I did, I said. Under oath, I'll say it again. Theft halts production. I let silence stand a moment, the way I learned from years of measuring currents before setting a skiff into the water. Counselor, if you intend to argue that capacity is defined by whether a man refuses to bless a counterfeit, you'll need a different dictionary. He sighed as if I'd disappointed him by being literate. Mr. Grayson, the court cares about order. We're offering you a clean solution. License the designs, accept a founder's stipend, maintain your dignity. Otherwise, this will get public. It already is, I said, and ended the call. The quiet after a threat has its own pitch. It's not peace, more like the stillness a forest keeps before wind arrives. I walked to the workshop and ran my fingers along the bench until they found familiar nicks. A crescent from a dropped chisel, a constellation of tiny dots where varnish once spit back at a stubborn knot. Those scars had never asked me for proof. They just remembered. At 10:30, blazer and cufflinks blinked out. Their email arrived like a medicine bottle with no label. We regret to inform you that due to unforeseen reputational risk, we are suspending our involvement with Grayson Handcraft, LLC, effective immediately. They CC'd Ms. Kincaid and Derek. In the second paragraph, they used the phrase, ongoing dispute regarding provenance. Lawyers love that word. It was the polite way to say, who really owns this? And which way is this wind going? Their money had decided to check the weather from somewhere else. At noon, Officer Burden knocked. He held a folded sheet and an expression caught between professional and human. "Mr. Grayson," he said, "service," and handed me the paper. Notice of opposition to temporary restraining, order and petition for limited guardianship. He watched my face like a medic watches a wounded man stand. "You gonna be okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "If I start using the stove as a filing cabinet, I'll call you." His mouth twitched. "The chief asked me to remind both parties to cool it. Nothing good happens when a civil fight turns hot." "Nothing good happened when a civil fight started with theft," I said, then softer. "But I'll keep my voice down." He nodded and glanced past me into the workshop. His eyes landed on the cabinet door with the ratios ajar, green marker joke visible like private scripture. "My granddad used your plans to fix a canoe in '03, he said. "Still floats?" "Tell him I still stand by the ratios," I said. "Granddad's gone," he replied gently, "but the canoe's fine." He tipped 2 fingers in that small salute of his and left. I read the opposition once, then twice. A lawyer's hand had polished Derek's fictions into something that could stand in a courtroom without blushing. Select incidents assembled like a collage. Misplaced invoice, interpreted as confusion. Forgotten appointment, recast as cognitive decline. 1.5 bourbons at a wake, rebranded as habitual. What they couldn't fabricate, they insinuated. What they couldn't prove, they wrapped in sympathy. We are concerned for Mr. Grayson's dignity in this season of life. If theft is the taking without consent, then this was theft of the narrative, stolen not by force, but by a white glove. I called Emma. She answered on the first ring. "He served you?" she asked. "He did." I could hear dishes in the sink, running water. The cottage sounded busy, like she was tidying a life too quickly to think. "He's going after capacity. Friday, 10 a.m. They'll be smiling while they do it." "Let them smile," she said, breath steady. "I asked Dr. Marjorie Tull if she'll testify. She treated Mom, but she's known you longer. She said yes." Dr. Tull had stitched half the county, births and broken wrists and the kind of conversations that last 2 minutes and stay 10 years. "That helps," I said. "And Dad?" Her voice softened. "I found something." I listened to the shape of her pause. You learn to read a pause the way you read wind. "He opened a line of credit in your name," she said. "A small one with the boat supply wholesaler. He forged your signature on a personal guarantee. I only saw it because they emailed the statement to the cottage by mistake last month, and I filed it, thinking it was nothing." The steady in her voice wobbled once, corrected. "I can get the email and the PDF with the signature." "We'll need both," I said and sat down hard. The chair creaked. A tired ship. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I lived inside his stories so long I started furnishing them." "He staged them well," I said. "A false house still looks like a house until it rains." I let the silence soften. "It's raining now." By 2, the rain had a name. Kincaid versus Evidence. Ms. Kincaid called with a different polish than hail. Cooler water, same glass. "Mr. Grayson, as a professional courtesy, we're notifying you that Mr. Lawson intends to file an emergency motion requesting an evaluation prior to Friday's hearing." "Tell your client I'll bring a crossword," I said. "He can watch me finish the Saturday grid and pen." She didn't laugh. "You understand. The court prefers not to see legacy businesses disintegrate. The optics are for men who can't stomach substance," I said. "We'll see them Friday." After the call, I walked the shoreline. The lake wore a coat of wind, ribs showing, then smoothing, then showing again, the way a horse flexes under a rider who knows what he's asking. I picked up a piece of driftwood and turned it in my hands. Once it had been part of a tree, then river, then storm. It had floated until it didn't. Now it lay in my palm. Still beautiful, still useful, if you know how to see it. Back inside, I began assembling the book, a 3-ring binder thick enough to stop a blade. I labeled sections with blue tabs in the same block print I'd used for the ratios decades ago. Deeds, registrations, Invoices, witnesses, photos, clamp marks, Helen. The last tab wasn't for the court. It was for me. A copy of her notebook page with that coffee ring and the notation Stillwater Skiff. Revised sheer 1/4. The ring overlapped her initials the way a wedding band overlaps a name. At 4, Jay knocked. He held his hoodie sleeves in his fists, like he was trying not to touch anything he couldn't keep. I didn't know if you'd want company, he said. Or help. Or silence. I can do any of those. You can sand, I said, and handed him a board. He smiled like a boy who'd been picked first for a team he thought forgot his number. We worked without talking for a while. The rasp of sandpaper has the same tempo as a good breath. It makes sense of a day for which nothing else will do. After a bit, he said, "He told me you'd be finished by now. That hearing would scare you off." "He doesn't understand scared men," I said. "We do our best work when the boat's taking water." He nodded and kept sanding. It calmed something in me to see a young set of hands learn the old patience. Push, lift, check. Push, lift, check. If I lost Friday, the lake would still be here. The curve of a plank would still need a gentle hand. Memory would still be written in wood grain and pencil in the quiet of a shop. At dusk. Just before dusk, a text arrived from an unknown number. A video file icon hovered above a single line. "Thought you should see what your daughter's been up to." I didn't open it. There are traps a man avoids, not because he's afraid, but because he respects gravity. I forwarded it to Emma and typed, "Don't click yet." Seconds later, my phone rang. "It's nothing," she said, voice tight. A clip from dinner cut to make me look unhinged. Someone sent it to my work email, too. 3 people CC'd? Who? 2 church friends and Derek's cousin, which means he's trying to make me move by shame. "Then move by truth," I said. "Forward it to Dr. Tull and Ms. Bixby with context. Light the room before he can control the lamp." She exhaled. "Okay, I'm okay." After sunset, the cottage porch light bloomed across the lane. I could see Emma's silhouette move behind the curtain. Small, then straight. I made soup I barely tasted and wrote a list in Helen's notebook. Friday, arrive early. Speak plainly. Show work. Don't chase every lie. Bring them to shore one at a time. Beneath it, I added a line I could hear Helen say, "You don't have to win the room. Just tell the truth to the judge who can hear it." At 9:30, a truck idled at the far end of the lane. Lights off. Engine humming like a low-grade fever. I stood on the porch without moving and let whoever it was measure my stillness. After 3 minutes, the truck eased back, turned, and slipped away. Not everything is a move. Some things are calibration. Before bed, I set the book on the table and placed Helen's photograph on top. The crack through the glass split her smile and recombined it. I traced that line with my thumb. "Friday," I said to the empty room. The room said Friday back, the way water answers when you speak low over it. I slept well for the first time in weeks, heavy, flat, without dreams. Morning would cut the rope or knot it tighter. Either way, the boat would tell the truth. I've learned there are 2 kinds of dawns. The first kind brings light. The second brings disclosure. On Thursday, the day before the hearing, the world woke up in the second sort, the kind that peels off paint to show whatever's been rotting underneath. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. I brewed coffee and set the book in the middle of the table like a keel. Outside, still water looked level and indifferent. If the lake cared about perjury, it didn't show it. I called Emma at 7 on the dot. She answered with a whisper. She'd been up since 3. "I found the paper trail," she said. "All of it." She came a half hour later with a laptop under her arm and determination in her posture. She shook off the cold, sat, and opened an email chain. Subject line, Merchant ID approval. It was from last May. The first message was a boomerang of flattery and falsehood. Derek vouching for our founder, Mr. Grayson, who is no longer active but blesses the brand. The next message contained attachments, JPEGs of my signature clipped from an old subcontractor form. He had cut the loop of my G and pasted it like a stamp onto new PDFs, where I supposedly authorized account access. "See the pixel halo?" Emma pointed. "If you zoom, you can see the edges. It's a composite." She clicked through to the merchant processor dashboard. The account names were tidy and false. Grayson Family Craft, Legacy Fund, Wholesale Materials Holding. The deposits ran like a vein from online orders to a checking account at Lake and Pine Credit Union I'd never opened. Another tab revealed the P.O. Box, Box 418, not ours, and a forwarding address downtown at a co-working suite. He compartmentalized it, Emma said softly. Business income here, vendor payments there, and a personal card as the siphon. She opened a spreadsheet, her work. Color-coded lines trace money moving between the accounts like wind across grass. Blue for retail deposits, red for withdrawals labeled consulting, green for inventory reimbursements. The red lines led to Derek every time. "Is there a signature card?" I asked. She nodded. "And a selfie video he sent the bank to verify your consent while you were under the weather." She pressed play. The clip lasted 8 seconds. Derek leaned in close to the camera with his hand under his chin like a nurse checking a patient's jawline. "Walter approves," he said, glancing off screen. "He's tired. We'll sign tomorrow." No view of me, only the back of a chair. I felt the old tide of shame and heat in my chest, then let it drain. Shame was useless now. Precision wasn't. "Download everything," I said. "Date stamp it. Mirror it to a thumb drive in the cloud. We bring both to court." We worked in near silence for 2 hours, only the printer's warm breath punctuating the cold room. Halfway through, I heard the soft knock I've come to recognize. Jay stood in the doorway, hands pocketed, eyes bright from the morning wind. "You said yesterday you might need someone to fetch and carry," he said. "I can fetch. I can carry." I handed him a list. "Stop by the diner. Ask Lou if we can pull last month's paper, the one with Derek's expansion story, plus a fresh copy from this morning if they printed a follow-up. Then swing by the shop. Photograph everything pinned to the wall, wide shots and details of the redesigned labels. No commentary, just the truth." "Yes, sir," he said, half grin, and took off like a kid sent to gather kindling. When he left, I felt younger by his share. There are days when faith borrows boots. At 9, my phone buzzed. Hale and Randolph again, this time an email, not a call. They'd attached a courtesy copy of their petition for limited guardianship, a sleek, polished document whose paragraphs tried on sympathy like tailored suits. It suggested I was a revered craftsman in his winter years, one whose dignity must be preserved by prudent management. I recognized the strategy. Strangle truth with kindness, and call the hand holding the ribbon a friend's. They included 3 exhibits: the edited voicemail, a screenshot of me at the dinner table looking stern under candlelight, and a notarized statement from one of the investors claiming I'd agitated the room and appeared confused about modern inventory tracking. The 4th exhibit rendered the rest grotesque. A grainy still from a phone camera showing me at the cabin sink, pouring bourbon down the drain. The caption read, "Concerning relationship with alcohol." Emma's gaze jumped to my face. I shrugged once. He doesn't understand the difference between a bottle and a grief. I called Dr. Marjorie Tull. She'd already seen the docket. "I'll bring your charts," she said, voice like a gentle instrument. And my eyes. "They're better than the charts. You pass my Saturday crosswords faster than half the town." I laughed in spite of everything. "Bring the one with the baseball clues." I still remember the 1986 Mets. Before lunch, the town made its decision, not about me, but about noise. The local paper ran an online update, injunction hearing set in legacy dispute over Grayson handcraft boats. They used a file photo of my hands holding a plane. The first comment under the article was from a woman I didn't know. Whatever else is true, those are working hands. Sometimes a stranger remembers you better than kin. Jay returned with the newspapers and 2 photos of the workshop wall. In one image, the Lawson No. 3 print was crooked. In the other, the corner of a taped-over name peeked out, where the paper had shifted and the tape failed. It was small, but it mattered. Gray, in my old block print, the edges of Wyson ghosting under the white. "Good eye," I told him. "I didn't do anything," he said, bashful. "You noticed," I said. "Most men mistake noticing for nothing. It's the whole job." At 1, the cottage phone rang for Emma, an unknown number from a number she recognized. She put it on speaker and set it on the table like a cautious offering. "Emma," Derek said smoothly, "we should avoid the circus. Tell your father to settle. I can make the guardianship petition go away. He keeps his name. I run the business. Everyone keeps their dignity." "No," she said. "Don't be dramatic," he replied. "The bank likes my version. They'll like it better if you like it." She took a breath. "You used my mother's notes to erase my father, Derek. There's not a bank in the world I'll join you at." He paused, recalibrated. "There's a reason you loved me," he said softly, the old weapon polished, and offered again. "I knew how to build the story you wanted to live in." "I love the truth more," she said, and hung up. The room was quiet for a beat. Somewhere outside, a woodpecker hammered the cedar like a metronome. I wrote a single line in Helen's notebook. Emma chose the weather and let it rain. At 2:30, we took the book and our drives and went to Lake and Pine Credit Union. The branch manager, Mr. Bennett, had careful hair and a face that wanted to say no nicely. "Privacy," he said. "We can't discuss an account not in your portfolio." "Then look at this one that is," I said, sliding the deed and my ID across the desk. "And then look at the scanned signature on the merchant account application, and tell me if you'd cash a check with that penmanship." He stared at the pages, then at me, and back again. People who handle money can smell counterfeit faster than priests smell sin. "Mr. Grayson," he said finally, "if you file a fraud affidavit, I can freeze transfers pending adjudication. I can't release funds, but I can stop them from moving." "Do it," I said. He hesitated. "There will be consequences." Angry calls. "Noted." He printed the form. Emma read every line and handed me the pen. I signed slowly, the way you draw a line around a trespasser's shoe to show where the foot stood, half on your porch, half on the road. When we walked out, the sky had changed. Clouds had shouldered up from the west, humped and gray, a weather front arriving ironclad. The wind off the lake sharpened. I felt the pressure shift in my ears and in my bones. Old sailors will tell you their knees predict rain. Boat builders just learned to taste it in the air. Back at the cabin, I set the book on the mantel under Helen's photo. The crack in the glass canted through her smile like a lightning bolt frozen. I didn't straighten the frame. Truth has its own geometry. At 4, Officer Burden texted, "Off the record. Investors withdrew. Ms. Kincaid still in. Hale filing emergency eval request at 5. See you at 10 tomorrow." Then a second text. "My mother says if the court needs a witness, she bought your first Mariner in 01, and it's still in the boathouse. Says it rides true. Tell her the boat did most of the work," I typed. Then after a second, "Thank you." 5 came, and so did the motion. It arrived by email, 7 pages of frost, asking the court to place me under evaluation based on observable cognitive lapses and unsafe use of equipment. Their Exhibit D was a blurry photo through my shop window of me working at a bandsaw without a guard. I squinted. "That's because the guard was in my hand," I said aloud to nobody, on the way back onto the machine after a blade change. Context is always the thief's first target. We printed the motion, slid it into the book, and made the last tab. Counter moves. The binder was heavy now. It thudded when you set it down, the way a boat thuds when it kisses a dock clean. It sounded like finality's cousin. At 6, with the sky almost black, The power flickered and settled. The lake went from steel to velvet. Emma stood by the window with her arms wrapped around herself, like a woman warding off cold that had nothing to do with weather. "You tired?" I asked. "Beyond," she said, then smiled, but not scared. "Good," I said. "Scared men can tell the truth. Tired men can live it." We ate soup again, hotter, better. After, I closed the shop and checked every window. I set the book in my bag. The cottage lamp went dark across the lane, then came back on. Emma's habit since childhood, a signature of safety. Lights on, off, on. I answered back with my own. Off, on, off. Families are just languages we learn and relearn until we die. I slept early, woke once to the wind pressing its palm against the house, and slept again. If Derek tried one more trick that night, I didn't notice. The boat sailed on without me for a few hours. It was a mercy. At 5, I woke before the alarm. I shaved carefully, the way a man does on a day that will ask him to show every edge. I put on the suit I'd worn to Helen's service. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, something with cedar in it and a secret I never learned to name. I placed the book in the crook of my arm and stood at the door until the sky admitted morning existed. When it did, I said it out loud, to the house and to the photograph and to the lake that refused opinion. "Let's go tell the truth." The lake didn't answer. It didn't have to. It had been telling the truth longer than any court. Tomorrow had come. The courthouse sat on the hill above Maple Hollow, a brick rectangle with a clock tower that hadn't told the right time in 15 years. It didn't matter. The people inside kept their own. Friday mornings smelled the same in every county building: coffee gone bitter, floor wax, and nerves. I parked beneath the oaks and sat a minute longer than necessary, hands steady on the wheel, waiting for the day to breathe first. Emma met me at the steps, a stack of folders hugged against her chest. She wore her mother's gray scarf. "Ready?" she asked. Her voice held fatigue wrapped in resolve. "As I'll ever be," I said. Inside, the air was too clean, the kind that erases scent, but not anxiety. The clerk led us to courtroom B. The nameplate on the bench read, Hon Judith Ferris. I remembered her father. He'd bought a Stillwater skiff in '99. Funny how legacies cross in small towns. Derek was already there. Navy suit, polished shoes. Expression as smooth as lacquer. Beside him sat Miss Kincaid, immaculate, scrolling through her tablet. Across from them, 2 investors whispered to each other, staying just long enough to see which way the current ran. Dr. Marjorie Tull sat in the gallery, hands folded, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to rehearse truth. Jay stood behind, her hat in hand, out of respect. Officer Burden leaned against the wall near the exit, not officially part of the case, but present all the same. Maple Hollow's conscience had shown up. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge looked up, glasses low. "We are here on the matter of Grayson versus Lawson et al., petition for temporary injunction and opposing petition for limited guardianship." She paused, letting the silence settle. "This will be civil, brief, and precise. Let's start with opening statements." Ms. Kincaid rose first, her voice velvet over iron. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Lawson, has nothing but respect for Mr. Grayson. We acknowledge his craftsmanship and decades of contribution to our community. However, with age has come difficulty managing complex business operations. Out of concern, my client formalized structures to protect the brand and ensure continuity. Unfortunately, misunderstanding has led to this proceeding." "Misunderstanding?" I whispered to Emma. She squeezed my hand once under the table. When Ms. Kincaid sat, Hale rose for the guardianship petition. "Your Honor, we're asking for limited oversight of Mr. Grayson's financial dealings. Evidence will show confusion, unsafe behavior, and memory decline consistent with diminished capacity." He gestured toward a screen. The edited voicemail played again, the cut abrupt and cruel. He smiled faintly. We have additional witness statements confirming episodes of agitation and disorientation. The judge nodded once. We'll see them. Mr. Grayson? I stood holding the book against my chest. My voice came easier than I expected. Your Honor, if we're measuring capacity by who remembers truth the longest, I'm confident I qualify. I built the name Grayson Handcraft in 1998. I registered it with this county in that very office. I pointed toward Marla, who waved from her seat like a proud aunt. My late wife and I ran it until 2020. After she died, I stopped production. I did not sell, gift, or transfer ownership. I opened the book. My opponent, who also happens to be my son-in-law, registered a new LLC last year using my name and my designs. He submitted digital signatures created from a scanned copy of my handwriting. I held up the page, zoomed for the court camera. Pixel halo visible at 800% magnification. A murmur rolled through the room. I let it settle. When I confronted him, he claimed I was deceased. When that failed, he claimed I was unfit. When that failed, he called the police. Now he's calling for guardianship. That's not concern. That's escalation. Judge Ferris looked up. Do you have supporting evidence? Multiple affidavits, I said, sliding them to the clerk. Clients verifying sales made under false pretenses. Shipping records from the post office. Bank documentation showing funds redirected to an account I never opened. And, I turned to Emma, emails, proving composite signatures. Emma stood, her hands shaking only once. Your Honor, I was listed as co-owner on the new LLC. I signed documents believing they were insurance forms. When I learned the truth, I withdrew and filed a statement under penalty of perjury. She passed her file forward. This includes video evidence of Mr. Lawson discussing plans to manipulate my father's appearance in front of the bank. Judge Ferris raised an eyebrow. We'll watch that now. The room dimmed slightly as the video played. Derek's voice filled the speakers. If we get him to look confused in front of the bank, the paperwork will flow. When it ended, the silence wasn't shock. It was the stillness of verdict forming. Ms. Kincaid cleared her throat. Your Honor, out of context? Context, the judge said, is rarely kind to deceit. She turned to me. Mr. Grayson, your counsel? I'm representing myself, I said. My lawyer's at the lake. A smile ghosted the corner of her mouth. Noted. I laid the last exhibit on the desk, the photo from Jay showing the taped-over name. This is the workshop wall. You can see where Grayson was covered by fresh paper. If you peel it back, the judge nodded, we'll take judicial notice of the visual. Then came the crossfire. Hale paced with controlled irritation, trying to extract contradictions. Mr. Grayson, do you consider yourself retired? I consider myself alive. You ceased production, yes? Paused, not surrendered. Do you recall the date of your wife's passing? November 14th, 2020. And the year you registered your first business? 1998. Same year your client graduated high school. A few chuckles broke in the back rows. Hale's jaw clenched. Your Honor, we're not here for humor. No, Judge Ferris said. We're here for clarity. Continue. He tried once more. You admit to pouring alcohol down the drain? I do. Why? To keep it from the wrong hands. Yours? No, I said evenly. His. Even Ms. Kincaid exhaled sharply through her nose at that one. Hale regrouped, adjusting his tie. Nothing further. The judge looked at her notes for a long time, then at Derek. Mr. Lawson, would you like to address the court? Derek rose, buttoning his jacket, smile calibrated. Your Honor, I never meant harm. I wanted to preserve something beautiful. My father-in-law taught me everything I know. I saw him drifting. I stepped in. Maybe I overstepped, but I kept the name alive. She studied him. And you kept the profits alive as well? He hesitated. I reinvested them. In a separate account, she said, flipping a page. Under your name alone. He blinked. For efficiency. Efficiency. She let the word hang, heavy as a gavel. Mr. Lawson, efficiency without integrity is theft with better ape stationery. He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. Enough! She turned to me. Mr. Grayson, the court finds you competent. The guardianship petition is denied with prejudice. As for the injunction, it is granted pending full adjudication of ownership and trademark. Production under Grayson Handcraft LLC will cease immediately. Further, due to evidence of misrepresentation, this court is referring the matter to the county prosecutor for review. Derek's color drained. Miss Kincaid whispered something, but he didn't seem to hear. His gaze drifted toward Emma, maybe for mercy, maybe for someone to blame. She didn't look back. Judge Ferris continued, voice steady. Mr. Grayson, your evidence is thorough, your conduct dignified. I advise you to retain counsel for the civil suit to follow. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. The sound was clean, final, almost kind. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the murmurs began, quiet, respectful, the sound of air returning to a room that had been holding its breath. Jay let out a low whistle. Dr. Tull smiled, small and satisfied. Officer Burden gave his 2-finger salute again. Outside, the air had changed. The storm that had threatened all night had passed without rain. The sky was scrubbed blue, and the lake below caught it whole. Emma walked beside me down the courthouse steps. You okay? She asked. Better than okay, I said. I'm hungry. We laughed, the kind of laughter that leaks out of exhaustion instead of joy. At the truck, she touched my sleeve. Dad? Yeah? I think Mom would have liked that judge, I smiled. Mom would have knitted her a scarf. As we drove back towards Stillwater, the road shimmered with puddles that weren't from rain. Just reflection. The town looked the same, but something fundamental had tilted. Truth back in its rightful place, even if only for a while. I knew there would be more paperwork, more hearings, more ways for Derek to claw at what he'd lost. But for the first time in years, the horizon didn't look like a wound. It looked like distance you could travel honestly. When we reached the lake, the cabin waited, quiet, whole, unchanged. I carried the book inside and set it on the table. The crack in Helen's photo caught the late sun, and for a moment it looked mended by light. Welcome home, I said to the empty air, and I swear somewhere in that stillness, the house answered. There's a sound a courtroom makes when a case ends. It isn't the gavel or the murmur. It's quieter. The air itself loosening like a long-held breath, finally finding its way out of the lungs. That's how it felt when Judge Ferris left the bench, and the people began to stand. Relief, yes, but relief has its own gravity. The ride home from the courthouse took less than 20 minutes. It felt longer. The road wound through maple groves just starting to yellow, sunlight catching the first hints of fall. I hadn't noticed how much summer had already slipped away. Seasons move while you're busy defending the past. Emma drove. She insisted. I didn't argue. My hands were steady enough, but I wanted her to feel the road under her own decisions. Neither of us said much. The lake came into view, spread flat and silver beneath the hills. From the highway you couldn't see the cabin yet. Only the edge of the trees and the glint of water through them. When we reached the turnoff, she slowed. You think he'll stop? She asked. Men like Derek don't stop, I said. They run out of road. We turned onto the gravel lane. The truck's tires crunched through last night's fallen leaves. I saw the porch first, and then the roof, then the shape of the old sign Helen carved 20 years ago. Stillwater Lodge. The wind had worn half the paint off the letters. It looked better that way. Honest. We parked. I carried the book inside and set it down on the table. The cabin smelled like cedar and faint dust. Jay had been through earlier. I could tell by the way the tools were stacked neatly, wood scraps swept into a single pile. Emma poured coffee. We sat without speaking. There are silences that ache and silences that heal. This one was both.